Hello and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
And welcome to our show. Thank you as always for either listening or watching or listening and watching. If you are new to the show, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Hey, Randall, if someone wants to comment, what's the best way?
Probably right now our Facebook page, or you can even send us an email. Just go to chrisandrandall.com to find either.
And again, if you like the show, we're really happy about that. If you hate our show, we're sad, but we'll own up to the fact that, we're still learning our way and not everything we're going to say is right. So we love it when people call us on it. And if you've got questions or you want to keep the discussion going, we'll even do shows with that. Hey, Randall, we did a show on The Watchmen a couple episodes back. You remember?
Yes, I remember.
I just heard from a friend of mine who listened to that show, and he went out and he spent 30 of hard-earned dollars on Amazon to get the most recent deluxe edition, because that's how interested he was in the Watchmen.
Of the classic comic, right?
Of the classic comic. So DC Warner's owes us a commission paycheck. In fact, I think moving forward, only we should do sponsored shows, where the only thing we will talk about are things where people can turn around and then buy those things or subscribe to those things. And then in turn, the makers of those things should pay us money. And that way we'll never really have to talk about anything we aren't going to make money off of. So given that, what do you want to talk about today?
All right. So today I had an idea. I wanted to do the aesthetics of toys, mostly through the lens of our favorite childhood toys.
So this means we're going to be making money off of Mattel, Hasbro, Kenner. So everything we discuss right now will be something that, go to our affiliate link when you just go on, Randall.
Yeah. So, this is a topic. I loved playing with toys as a kid. I had many toys, and my mother spoiled me a little bit. Your mother spoiled you too a little bit, didn't she, Chris?
No, she only spoiled me a lot. Not a little bit, a lot.
So we both love toys.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about this topic for a while. I did some research. I'm going to put the links to some of the relevant research I could find in the description. So if you're interested in going into more of the science of this, you can. This seems to be a dry subject, something that not a lot of people are going into. What are the aesthetics of toys? What makes a toy great? What makes a toy so compelling to a child? I was thinking about it, and I came up with five different types of toys. Okay, and there's a lot of toys that fit into more than one category, which makes them even greater.
I like this idea of categorizing toys, and one of the articles that you sent me was an MIT study. Very famous, noted psychologist. Oh God, I don't know whether it's psychology or Piaget. For those of you who study psychology and worked with children and the way their brains work in memory.
It was an MIT paper. It's linked in the description.
Right. And I want to talk about it before we get into yours, because I think it's a great jumping off point for what you're saying, which is when you look at early childhood development, they took his 5 stages of development and they used that to find classifications of the roles that toys play in your development as you grow up. And since basically that is something we're going to be talking about in this episode, and aesthetics and development are almost intertwined. Do you mind, Randall, if I just read this off first? And
yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Then we can layer that with your taxonomy. So they felt like popular toys for children under the age of 18 months, both boys and girls, involve mostly sensory play. And they felt that this corresponds directly with Piaget's sensory motor stage of development, where children learn about their environment, objects, through their senses. So I remember, I was born in 1965. and my mom has 2 graduate degrees in early childhood development. And that my mom had access to both toy stores and also educational stuff that teachers have. So I had a lot of styrofoam blocks. Did you have any kind of things like that?
Yeah, I had some blocks. I had Legos. I had construction sets like Constructs. I had
Anything that was just pure tactile, like when you were 18 months, that's going as far back as possible.
Yeah, I had a
Just
lot
like
of baby toys.
the things that you would touch.
Yeah, I had all the typical baby toys. Like, do you remember that phone that had wheels and a face? Do you remember that? It was like an
No.
old rotary phone. This is a very
Oh,
popular
the phone.
toy.
Yeah, no, I had the phone. Yes, actually, I had. We had
I've
rotary
noticed
phones.
many kids have these phones. It's
And-
like
and,
a phone. It's got a face. It's got wheels, and kids love it.
Yeah, kids love wheels, phones, but at 18 months, it's even more abstract.
You know what I've noticed?
You're right.
I just want to say, you know what I've noticed about kids and phones? Even the smallest kids, they love phones. They love to pick up the phone and pretend they're talking to somebody on the phone.
True. I think we got into this weird thing where I said foam, FAOM, and it sounds like FHONE. So, I mean, there's just, like, I was a kid, I had these books. You must have had these books. Your mom will read them to them, and they had fabric, and then you would feel the different fabric.
Yes, I had those books, yeah.
And of course,
I remember those.
This is the time where you get your first toy. Did you ever have any teddy bears or stuffed animals?
Yes, I had many stuffed animals. I remember putting them all into like a bin and just taking them out and talking to them and putting them all back, and that's where they lived.
Yeah, and the stuffed animals, my mom, God love her soul, she turned me on. And if you're at home and you want to really buy a wonderful stuff, there's a company called Steiff. Gund and Steiff are like the two. They're both. Gund is 100 years old. Steiff is 125 years old. They're the 2 biggest makers of stuffed animals. And I'm sorry, folks. I'm gonna right back and tell me I'm wrong, but I feel like Gund is not a great maker of stuffed animals, but Steiff. And the woman who founded Steiff, she only wanted the best material, so she would use Angora, mohair, fine wood to make sure that the eyes were fully plastic, that the touch was very good. And I had all sorts of bears and other animals, and they had this beautiful plush feel to them. And about 4 years ago, my cousin had a child, and it was the first time that I walked into a toy store, and I found I found a Steiff bear, and I thought it was so perfect. And I showed it to my mom before I gave it to my cousin, said, this is exactly the same kind of bear I got you. So I found it so amazing that in a store where there was literally hundreds of teddy bears, that I was somehow drawn to the one just through the sense of touch that somehow stayed encoded in my brain.
So how
over half a century ago.
How old were you, Chris?
When I bought this bear for my cousin? Oh, I was a wee lad of 50.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about a bear when you were a kid.
But I
so
could I got that kid. I had that bear when I was 18 months. So half a century later,
remembered what it felt
just through, and I was trying to figure out why this bear was because I looked at so many bears in the store, and I don't understand why did I gravitate towards this particular bear. And then my mom said, this is exactly the same bear I bought you. So that is how important in the sensory development.
Well, can I just say, I think
early period is.
Well, I just want to say that I think that there was something about that bear for you, because I've noticed with kids, you give kids a bunch of different stuffed animals and they end up having a favorite.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the movie Toy Story where the kid's favorite is Woody, right?
Yeah. And in fairness too, my cousin took that bear, took a photo of the bear, because at the time that I bought the bear for the child, it was not only the child and the bear were the exact same height. So that bear became the child's favorite object to play with. And then every month she would take another photo with the bear until by the end of the year, the child was twice as big as the bear. And every couple of years, I'll see her take another photo with the bear just to see how much smaller the bear gets. I don't want to get into his story, But it really does. There's something about that. So then the second stage.
Well, wait, before you go on, I want to say
Absolutely.
there's this famous, I just thought of this. There's this famous experiment with monkeys where, do you know what I'm talking about, Chris? Like in the 50s or
Yeah.
60s, they had a cage. They put a monkey in a cage. This is a horrible experiment. A baby monkey in a cage, and they put food water dispenser on one side, and then they put like a stuffed animal that looked like kind of like the monkey's mother on the other side.
Yes.
And they were going to see, and the experiment they were trying to see if the monkey would just associate whoever gave it food and water with the mother.
Yeah.
And what the monkey would do, the baby monkey, is it would go over to the food and water and drink and eat, and then it would go back to the stuffed animal and hug it.
Yeah.
And so it was like fascinating and sad at the same time.
And there's animism, and that's interesting too, because that's where you get into the second stage, which is 18 months to 6 years in Piaget's pre-operational stage. This is categorized sometimes by egocentric behavior, where the child believes everyone shares their viewpoint. This can also be categorized by symbolism, where the child can make objects stand for something else, and animism, where the child believes all objects have the same kind of consciousness. And that is where I could see why both me and the monkeys could confuse.
Well, do you remember,
because
Chris?
When you're playing with your bears, your stuffed animals, right? You actually think they have consciousness.
Well, do you remember? You remember that then as a kid, right, Chris? Where it was hard for you to get it out of your head that these objects weren't alive, right? I mean, they seem to have a souls. They seem to.
Oh yeah.
They seem to just. You could imagine. I remember as a child, I could imagine all my toys just like in the movie Toy Story, just living a life without me. You know, when I left the room, right? I mean,
absolutely, and that's why you assemble them into a congress. You know, it's why you hold on to one when you're a kid, because it's like you feel like they're hugging you and you're hugging them. It's interesting, and I often thought about pets and children, and that when you're a child, you really like to be hugged, and you're normally being hugged by adults, and when you're a small child, adults are just giants. You know, they're big; they can lift you to the skies. But when you're hugging a small pet like a cat or a dog, especially if you're hugging a doll, you're the adult. You know what I'm saying? When you're hugging a doll, you're the one with size and scope and mass. You know, you're the one in control. And
well, you're also the one then giving love and security and comfort to something smaller than you.
Yeah, because it's smaller than you and it needs your protection, and you get to choose when. And it is interesting. And I even say this stage fits well with our label of fantasy play. Fantasy play is largely composed of toys that afford between the ages of 2 and 5. There are many toys that afford what they call both sensory and fantasy play. And between 5 and 7, there are many toys that afford challenge and fantasy play. And the difference between the two is the difference between, we just said, our dolls, our people, and we like to pet them. And challenge, which is really now where you get into things like
games,
mostly games, puzzles, things you assemble, things that involve you fixing, repairing, working with a timer, Lincoln Logs. I don't know if kids still have Lincoln Logs.
Lincoln Logs. I had some.
Yeah, Lincoln Logs, Lego. I apologize, folks. I have spent the better part of a week looking up the name for a very particular common toy that I just cannot figure out. And there's very few things on Google you can't find if you don't know the name of. But there were this plastic. Okay, so you would get these colored plastic tubes, and then you have these gray, like donut-shaped circles, and you'd stick the plastic.
I'm pretty sure those are Tinker Toys, Chris.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So Tinker Toys, mystery solved. I had Now, this is really terrible to say this. So, I grew up in New York City, and I had access to certain toy stores no one else could possibly have. And
FAO Schwartz.
FAO Schwartz was the Mecca and Medina of toys. It was a toy store that was dedicated to, if you saw the movie Big, and then you remember that Tom Hanks is like dancing on this piano thing that's basically on the floor. It's like the world's largest piano on a floor. That's FAO Schwartz.
I'm not going to say you're a spoiled child, but FAO Schwartz was your local toy store.
Well, no, it was not my local toy store, thankfully. But it was a toy store in the city that, when I was truly a good boy, that's where I'd get my toys.
How do you
from.
think,
And,
just out of curiosity,
go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you a question. Out of curiosity, how did FAO Schwartz in New York compare to like the average Toys R Us? And I'm not sure if you experienced the average Toys R Us.
FAO Schwartz was certainly the size of a Toys R Us and would have carried the same toys as a Toys R Us. And Toys R Us, I think, technically existed at the same time as FAO Schwartz. There was probably no Toys R Us that I knew of in Manhattan because mostly stationery stores sold toys as a kid and Woolworth sold toys. But FAO Schwartz would get not just the generic mass market toys, but they'd get toys from Europe, and they would get really crazy expensive toys. And then even, you have to remember that most toy makers were located in New York City when I was growing up. So even the biggest toy maker, like the company that made Tinker Toys, had a limited line production of giant size Tinker Toys. So a regular Tinker Toy tube is what? Foot long? Not even.
Half a foot.
6 inches, half a foot. So I would get these like 2 to 3 to 4 feet long Tinker Toys with literally things that look like a small tire to connect it. And I could make forts and all sorts of trapezoids that you could sit in like a tent.
How do you still have those?
Oh, somewhere? God, no, I wish I did. And God knows what they'd be worth. So
that's really amazing. You're blowing my mind right now.
Yeah, it
Giant
really
Tinker
was.
Toys.
It was one of my favorite toys. I had it. I had them so long. I had them well into my teenage years because and it's very interesting. Certain toys lasted longer than other toys, and we can get into that now. They do say that with boys, we tend to gravitate more towards mechanical toys and things that will take up more of our time.
Well, the research seems to show, and I don't know if I read this somewhere. I don't know if it's any of the papers I'm gonna put in the description, but you can look this up. Boys seem to tend to, according to the research, they tend to play with toys a lot longer, like well into their teen years, like up into the age 13, 14 or so. And little girls seem to abandon toys very quickly. Like around 8 or 9, it's like almost they're gone. They're off doing like makeup and clothes and things like that.
Pop culture. In fact, they're finding it harder to market toys to girls because they grow up so much faster and their interests are much more mature. So let's see, what was the next stage? We're almost through this, I promise, because I want to get to your version, which I think is even more interesting. So fantasy play, and then children from ages 6 to 12 are in Piaget's concrete operation stage. Thought becomes more rational in this stage, and children can engage in play that involves rules and classifications. In this stage, toys that afford pure challenge emerge in our chart. Pure challenge. So, did you ever play a Battleship?
Yes, of course.
I thought Battleship was probably, I don't think Battleship was the first challenge game I ever played, but I loved it because first off, I got into war toys many stages down. And maybe Battleship was the last of the war toys that I would get that were not a video game. But the concept of Battleship was you had a grid panel and your opponent had a grid panel. And neither you nor your opponent could see the other opponent's grid panel. But you had your panel where you would stick your ships, and then above that panel was a chart where you would try to figure out where your opponent's ships were, and you would have these little plastic pieces. Now, if memory serves me right, you would ask, like, do you have a piece on B9 or something like that, right? How did that work?
Right. You would call out a grid coordinate B9, and then your opponent would say hit or miss, and you never got to see
Right.
their board. And I remember playing with my cousin,
Yeah.
and one of my cousins would just cheat like crazy on that game. So like I would, I would call out B9. It'd
Yeah.
be a hit, but he would say miss, and then he'd move
Sure.
his ship, and I'd be like, "Are you moving your ship?" And he'd say no, and he thought he could get away with it because I'm younger than him, right? So I only played with him like
Actually,
once. I guess.
that was the thing I really remember with every game I ever played is cheating was considered the worst thing. Like, oh my God, cheater, cheater. You know, you would call them out. I'd like to tell you there was never a day where I didn't flip a board in anger. Even my mom called me out for doing that once when we were playing a game. Not even a game with my sister, just me and my mom. And I remember doing that much. I'm just saying, did you ever cheat in any of these challenge games?
Well,
Be
you know,
honest.
I tended not to be a cheater. I see. I as my day job. Okay, I'm a lifeguard as a day job, and I watch kids play all day, and
Yeah.
I noticed that a lot of kids cheat. You know, like playing Marco Polo.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cheating going on, but you know, I don't remember. Yeah, exactly. You know, I don't remember cheating as a kid. I didn't like to cheat. I didn't like when others cheated. You know, if other kids started to cheat, I didn't. It wasn't fun for me anymore. But
If
I
you're
mean,
listening, I'm making cheater face.
yeah.
Because I just realized there's people listening like, why is Miranda laughing?
Yeah, you can watch this on YouTube if you want to see Chris's cheater face. Yeah, but I don't know, Chris. Did you cheat as a kid when you played games with other
No,
kids?
I would just get very angry and frustrated and walk away.
Yeah,
I
me
think
too. Me too.
cheating involves, and it's very funny to think about it now, because we put cheating down a lot in that age of gameplay, but cheating actually is a form of higher thinking, right? Cheating is the ability to know what people are expecting and know how to deceive them.
Yeah, cheating and deception. Let's just say broadly, the category of deception is something that not all kids are interested in, but a good number of kids, especially in that age range, I'd say 6 to 12, they are obsessed with how to deceive their peers. You know, the best way to
Yeah.
deceive them. I mean, I might be more successful in life if I too was obsessed with deception at age
Well,
6 to
it's
12.
weird now because you hear in the world of video games cheat codes, like hacks, cheat codes, way to cheat the game. So, and cheating actually, I think now cheat codes really mean more like a hack, like how to get
Now,
past the barrier.
now that I think about it, Chris, I haven't thought about this in years, but I think, I remember gravitating toward video games as a kid. And I think one of the reasons I really liked video games is because cheating was impossible on a video game,
Yeah,
theoretically.
and absolutely. So if you were going to play your friend in a video game, or you were going to play a computer in a video game, you really couldn't manipulate it. And you're absolutely right. Every other game you could cheat at freaking Monopoly if you wanted to. If you really there's so many card games, especially. But you're right. It is interesting to think that I think games today it's harder to cheat. Let me get to the last one. So figure the final stage, PJ's final formal operation stage. Here, the child can think abstractly. So this is really basically after the age of 12. You are now in the final formal operation stage. Here, the child can think abstractly, speculate different solutions to given problems. The child will make a hypothesis about the world and then test them with concrete evidence. This stage lends itself nicely to challenge-related play. And I think about this a lot because my girlfriend is a professor of psychology, and she will often give field assignments to her students, and they have to test a theory to validate it. And the level of creativity and originality that these people in their teens and 20s, for the most part, are coming up with really reminds me of this. And I started to think that I think the last game that I really played, and it did involve toys, was Dungeons and Dragons. And I
played
say
that,
it
yeah.
did doll of toys because you had the dice, which were a toy, but you could also buy the figurines.
Yeah, did you play tabletop version or paper and pencil only version?
Both.
Okay.
I started off in paper pencil, and then I moved to tabletop. And as I mean, I played it for 2 years straight on the weekends, starting from pencil to tabletop, getting the toys, getting the better dice, doing all the things that you're supposed to do, and you know,
Did you
coming up with
paint?
strategies. And
Did you paint the figures?
I tried, and I did a terrible job, so I would just have other friends do it for me. But I was always in awe of kids who could, because if you were DM, you'd have to, first off, it's a very different to play Dungeons and Dragons, and it's another thing to design a campaign. And if you're really hardcore into it, in my period, you would buy a campaign, but you would start playing, adding on to it. You would add new things that aren't on the grid, new challenges, new world building, and
Yeah, I played a role playing game with friends. We played a Vietnam role playing game called Recon, and
yeah.
it was a fun stripped down Dungeons and Dragons. There were only uh, three characteristics each character had, and that was enough. I mean, it really was enough, and it was a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
I designed that game. I usually led the campaigns. It was great.
I remember I played a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and it works on levels. And the more you utilize the skills that you have, the more you move up a level. And somebody was a thief, and they robbed one of the other players, and that just gave them enough points to move up a level. So in that game, even deception and treachery was not inherently a bad thing. It was just another strategy to come up with in order to improve your odds of doing well.
You know, that's funny. I remember I played Risk one time with some friends, and I broke a treaty when I thought it was good for me with another guy.
Yeah.
And he never forgave me, ever. For years.
One of the few times that well, of course not. One of the few times I ever played games as an adult, remember, and it wasn't Magic, but it was like Magic. There were these card games in the 90s with different rules that you would play with other people, and different cards had different powers.
There was a game called Stratocaster Baseball. Is that what it was called? Stratomaster Baseball. It was a game you played with baseball cards.
No, this one was on baseball cards, but it was some variation. It was a ripoff of Magic, or maybe it was Magic, and I just don't remember it anymore. But I just remember that people would do that. We'd all gang up on one person, and then all of a sudden someone else would turn around and backstab me while I was doing that. Alliances would be broken. And I remember a friend, we were in our 20s, stormed out angry because of this. And it is interesting, and I don't know how it is for girls. I can only speak to a very gendered experience with this, but there's so many games where, especially as you got older, where deception and betrayal were part of the game. And I think the guy who ran away with his toys because he was upset was looked down on. You know what I'm saying? Whereas the guy who would just take his licks, that was respected. You just kind of got used to people lying and deceiving you. And that was just considered like the rules of life.
Well, the interesting thing about a lot of these games is there is no consequence. There's nothing riding on the outcome of the game, right? But yet, especially as a child, you get so emotionally invested in the outcome. It's like you've created a fantasy. The game creates a fantasy universe that you become completely emotionally invested.
Absolutely. And even their variations of those was I had cap guns and water guns. Didn't have a BB gun. My mom was very smart that way. She drew a hard line, and BB guns were so popular. They were on the back of comic book ads. And I had a lot of realistic toy guns. So the fact that she wouldn't let me have a BB gun, now I'm thinking, oh my God, thank you, Mom. Because there would have been no happy end on that one. But we'd go out into the park, my friends and I, we'd play hide and seek, and we'd shoot each other.
With BB guns?
No, with water guns.
Oh, okay.
Cap guns. Right. Jesus Christ. No, that's why my mom did not allow it. None of my friends' moms ever allowed us to have BB guns for that sole reason. because I knew that all we wanted to do for fun would play hide and seek and kill.
You know,
Hide, seek, kill. Hide, boom, boom, boom.
You know, I'm sure there's kids out there who shot each other with BB guns, but I've never met them. I would like to. I'd like to. You know, if there are kids that play BB gun wars,
I
I'd like to talk to them and hear how those went.
I mean, civilized adults today play, $20. They play laser tag or paintball tag. And it's all done hot. It's so gentrified. If you really think about it, like paintball tag and laser tag is the gentrified, boutiqueified, adultified version of just boys and girls hiding behind trees and rocks, willing to squirt you in the face.
You know, speaking of deception, so you played with water guns, but you use cap guns sometimes.
Cap guns, and it's weird too because cap guns don't hit you.
Right.
Know what I'm saying?
So I wanted, So speaking of
what's the deal?
Well, so speaking of deception, I remember playing gun games as a kid, and usually how it would go is one kid would say to another, "I hit you," and then the other kid would say, "No, you didn't." And then they would get an argument about if somebody got shot or not.
Oh yeah.
And then nobody got shot ever, right?
But good kids would also just sometimes take their licks and go, "I'm out," because we would play games like tag. There were so many games where you would either win or you lose, and I guess there is a stage as a child where your ego isn't yet tied into losing. I mean, that's the one thing I don't ever really remember. The few times I got upset. But most of the times, these games about where you lose, you just try to figure out how to win next time.
Well, I mean, you know that you're just going to be able to play again, right?
Yeah. So you weren't and there were a lot of violent games. I mean, goddamn, we were really.
Well, do you remember Dodgeball?
Robots, where we had two robots, literally robots in a ring. This is before your time. I looked it up. Came out in the late 60s.
No, they kept making it, Chris. They kept making it.
And they punched each other, and you would, with your buddy, fight each other with robots. Which,
right, they kept making
it. And yet is it MIT that actually now does that, where they have these different design teams create robots that fight each other?
I think there are still some robot battle arena things going on, but they're not as big as they used to be. I mean, do you remember Comedy Central put a robot war show on for a while? And I think that was the height of it. I mean, I don't know what's going on now.
I'm sure they're still working. I'm sure. Oh, so you have your categories. Why don't we go over them?
So you've gone through Piaget's, you've gone through these stages. Well, yeah, I wanted to look at toys just from a pure aesthetic perspective, and I'll just briefly talk about the categories, and then we'll go into them. So I think there's 5 different categories, aesthetic categories of toys. Okay, so the first one is physics toys. So the ball, just a simple ball, is like an obvious example, the primary example. And then you have arts and crafts, which is just like drawing or Play-Doh. Then you have games and puzzles, which is games and puzzles. And then you have dolls. Now, dolls, I think, is one of the most important categories of toy aesthetics, because dolls includes things like toy cars, even. Okay, so it's anything that is a miniature or a simulation of the real world. Okay, so you're talking about a lot of a huge category there. And then the final one is, I think, costumes, which is something girls are more into, but also boys. I mean, we could talk about the gender differences, but
I think costumes are very big for boys. I'm more than happy to talk about my costume time as a small child. I had all sorts of costumes.
I know. I don't know. Okay. Well, let's get to that at the end. I mean, we're definitely gonna get to that, Chris. Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk about physics toys first, though. Let's briefly talk about now. Physics toys are very obvious. They're just like construction sets. Legos, blocks, anything that helps kids learn about the physical properties of the universe. Right now, you, Chris, you had many physics toys. I was surprised.
I mean, before everyone hates me, by all means do. I grew up in Manhattan in the 60s and 70s and 80s. When I was 2.5, my father passed away. My mom was an early childhood teacher. So I was given a lot more toys than probably a lot of other people would get, probably out of sympathy, and also for my mom felt it was healthy for development. And they had access to funds. And I lived in a neighborhood which had a lot of good toy stores that were local. And I had a lot of friends who would have a lot of toys as well. I lived in a good upper middle class toy culture. So yeah, one of the toys again from FAO Schwartz that was very physics based that I think you're talking about, and really became a very big popular. I loved trains as a boy. I just loved trains. I loved the subway trains. There was a subway train yard in Flushing Meadows, Queens, by where the U.S. Open is, and I'd look at the trains there. There were train museums you could go to. Uh, I did not actually have a Lionel train set, but I had friends who had these gorgeous Lionel train sets, which you've seen the train sets, right?
Yes, I've seen. Yes, I think model trains are a huge category. I think they're a great example of a combination of a physics toy and a doll. I mean, any of the toy cars, any toy cars, I think, are a great example of a physics toy and a doll.
And
Which
with
is why,
trains, you're dealing with the model trains, you have electricity for the track and movement. And I was a little more complicated than I was really good with, but my mom did get me before then a giant train set, where I could sit on the engine and these big tracks. So I could put together the tracks, and I had a couple cars and a caboose, and I could then. It wasn't automated. I actually had to basically use my foot to like Fred
wait, so
Flintstone.
you rode? This was a train set that you could ride?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I must have been 7 years old, 6 years old. I'd sit on it, and it had wheels, and you had it on a track, and then you would just kind of push yourself around on the. I think there was like a little handle you could hold on to, and you just push yourself around in circles. You could put the tracks in odd. You could put it straight. You could bend them. You could do all sorts of track work. Actually, strangely enough, the thing I remember more about it was less the cars and more the beauty of track work. And again, growing up in New York City, I was taking trains every day and looking at tracks.
How old were you when you were playing with that train?
6, 7, maybe
Do
as
you,
long as 8.
do you remember the feeling you had when you were designing the track and riding it? And I mean, you played with it alone, right?
Designing the track, really, I think whether you were playing electronic train sets and building your own grid system, you're building your own grid system, right? So
Hmm.
you're really trying to think about how to get it from point A to point B. You know, it's. I would say if anybody here has children, please get them an electric train set because you are really forcing them to think about: does it go up a hill, down a hill, to a side? How did you deal with obstacles? How do you carry? I even had a giant caboose that I would put all my other toys in because I was so fascinated. Books on trains. I did have an automated boat because there's this pond in Central Park,
You had a
and you
remote
could.
control boat.
Yeah, not very long. That's the one thing I do remember. It didn't last so long that I had it for that long, but remote control boats were so popular when I was a kid. Remote control planes were popular when I was a kid. They even had little rocket ships that you would set up that would blast off. But I guess technically the 70s or the late 60s was the beginning of remote control for toys. And anything that could go in the water was a big deal. And again, physics, kites, right? Kites test physics
Yeah, kites, I would
because,
say, is a physics toy. There's some arts and crafts aspect to it.
especially when you would lose your kite because the wind would. I mean, what were your favorite physics toys?
I played with some kites a little bit. I was never good with kites. Um, I did. I remember I had Nerf pool as a kid. It was like this pool game that you could put on a normal table. You had the pockets that Nerf pool was amazing. You had these pockets that you could just stick on the table. So it was a combination of a physics game and a game and a physics toy, right? So
Yeah.
you could put it on a table, you could play pool. And it wasn't great pool, but you could do it. And it was great. I mean, I remember loving that game. Yeah, I remember a bunch of games that had physics aspect to it. There was a game called Bop Bop and Rebop that I bought like at a garage sale. I think it was totally out of print. This is an amazing game. It was you put a battery in it, and it had a giant turntable that was about the size of a record, maybe larger. And then you stick like a puck on it, and then it would just spin the puck around, and you would and up to 4 people could play, and you would have like a little character, and and you would try to just keep the puck from going out through your hole, your opening. And yeah, I remember my sister loved that toy.
So many little silver balls games where balls are moving, into different things. I had so many of them, and all about motion and speed. Pinball. Right?
Didn't you tell me you had your own pinball table?
I had my own pinball machine. That was like one of the last toys. That I was like 12 when I got. My mom bought a secondhand pinball for about $150.
See, I think pinball is a great example of a physics toy. I mean, it's a game as well, but it's such a great physics toy. I mean, because you're just watching that ball bounce around, the whole time.
I mean, I would say to me, I always thought of tabletop tennis as a toy, even though some people think of it as a game. Did you have any of that where you would
like ping pong? You mean?
Yeah, ping pong. Yeah.
We didn't have ping pong, but I remember as a kid, I always wanted a ping pong table, but no, we could never get a ping pong
table. Did you have the one with the soccer players and you would turn them around?
Oh, like a foosball type thing?
Yeah.
We never had a game like that either, no.
Or knock hockey, where there's the ones where the hockey players hit each other. There was a series of things, which again were just about balls in motion.
I played, I played a lot of those games at like friends' houses and things. I mean, those are, kids love these games where they just see the physical rules of the universe just unfold before their eyes. It's fascinating to them. It's like, I think it's one of the reasons kids like fireworks, maybe, because
in fact, I would love to play with fireworks when I was a kid. I don't even by law, I'm not allowed to discuss how much I like to play with fireworks when I was a kid. I will tell you, in New York City, if you wanted to buy smoke bombs and cherry bombs and the little things that you threw on the ground that went snap, not M80s, nothing going to destroy anything.
Those little teardrop shaped things, they're white, chrome. Yeah, those things were big when I was a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, cherry bombs, smoke bombs, the kind that would make snakes. Oh, actually, I'll be honest with you. In retrospect, those were my favorite toys.
Fireworks?
The ones that made, and smoke bombs and the snakes and anything that really just really.
You love cap guns, right?
Yeah, I love destruction.
Well, let me talk about.
I was a psychotic. Go on. That might be the perfect.
Well, a lot of kids love those things. I mean, let's talk about cap guns for a second because I don't think the kind of cap guns we had when we were kids are like available anymore.
Oh God, no! They're highly illegal. They look like real guns. They have explosive powder. If you threw a match to them, they just pop off. No, God, no.
They had real gunpowder.
Yeah.
In small quantities. There were two kinds I remember. There was the kind where it was like just a red strip of paper and it had little gunpowder embedded in like little squares on the strip. And then you would take these strips of paper, and they were long. I mean, they were like, I don't know, dozens of feet long, and you'd stick them in your gun, and then you'd pull the trigger, and it would snap, right? It would go off, and then the gun would automatically pull the paper through so that you could pull it again. So it was semi-automatic.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
there was the other ones that just had little plastic caps in it, right?
Right. The other one had like it was like for a 6-shooter, right? It usually had like 6 of them in a ring, and you'd stick it into your 6-shooter cap gun, and you'd have to load and unload it. Those weren't as fun because you had to keep loading and unloading. I mean,
I actually had one that came in a magazine. I swear to God, I had one that came in. It was a sidearm. I remember because someone I knew had been in the Army, and they actually showed me how they did that back in the Army. So just sidearm magazine of caps.
Oh my gosh! Well, what did it look like? The caps?
They were pellet size, but they would just go off like bullets. It was. It's been
That's
a long
amazing.
time.
I am sure that
they were pushing the technology as far as they could go until they banned it.
Yeah, I don't think you can get these kind of cap guns anymore because, you could take like the whole roll of those paper caps that I was talking about. You could light it on fire and throw it. And it was like
I used to light them on fire and throw them.
What would happen when you did that? It would all go off at once, right?
Oh, yeah. How did I not end up in a hospital? So, what is your next
Let's go.
category?
The next category is arts and crafts, which is an obvious one. I remember drawing in school more than I drew at home, but I know that there are a lot of kids who drew at home. Yeah, there's
I had,
coloring. Kids like coloring.
yeah, color. Well, my mom was an art teacher for most of the time, so we always had glitter and other things, and contact paper and glue. And I think because we're the exact same age as her students, she gave us a lot of crafty things to do for fun. I was pretty spoiled, but something that maybe you had, and a lot of our listeners may have had if they're around our age, I think really fell in this was I loved this one. It was called the Etch a Sketch. Did you have an Etch a Sketch?
Yeah, I never had an Etch a Sketch. I had friends that had one though. Yes.
It looks like a TV set, for lack of a better word, and it had two knobs, a left and a right knob, and one knob would allow you to go left to right, and the other one would allow you to go up and down, and you'd rotate the knobs so that you could etch different shapes or things. And then after you were done, you could just shake it up and down and it would go back to gray again. And I think that was I probably owned a brand new Etch-a-Sketch every year for at least 4 or 5 years because I was so fascinated by that. That was probably one of my favorite. What was your favorite of the crafts, arts and crafts toys?
I just love crayons. I remember loving crayons. I remember just like loving them, not even using the draw. I remember like getting a giant box of crayons and just going through the whole box, reading the names of the colors, drawing the
great colors.
drawing the color on a piece of paper, looking at it, looking at the name, wondering why they named it that. I mean, it was
different shades of green, different shades of blue.
I was more fascinated, I think, by the crayons than by anything I could draw with the crayons.
I loved crayons. And I loved when I discovered that if you put crayon over crayon, you could scratch it and get different colors. Light Bright. My girlfriend loved her Light Bright. I did not have a Light Bright. I thought I did. Maybe my sister did. But it was these little light pellets that you could design things with. Really cool. I actually believe, I looked it up, they still make Light Bright. Light Bright is one of the few toys in this category that is still, along with Crayola Crayon. Actually, Etch-a-Sketch, Light Bright, Crayola crayons, all the things that we've just talked, arts and crafts toys probably have the greatest continuity of any of the toys we've been talking about so far.
Yeah, kids love them. I mean, kids love them. They use them in school sometimes. I mean, maybe not Etch-a-Sketch or Light Bright, but I mean, crayons are all over schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
what's your next category, sir?
Let's go on to just games and puzzles. I mean, this is an obvious one. I mean, kids love games. I remember I was obsessed with games for a while as a kid. I mean, I loved them. I was obsessed with games well into my teen years. I mean, I played Dungeons and Dragons like you. I started playing Magic the Gathering when I was in college because that's when it came out. I went to the big there used to be a big tournament in Costa Mesa, and if anybody knows about Magic the Gathering, they know that was like the main big tournament for a while when it first started. This is before Hasbro bought them, right?
Yeah.
And that was fun. I used to go to that. Yeah, I was obsessed with Magic for a while. Yeah, I don't know. There was a feeling, and I don't get it anymore, I think I'm too old now, Chris, but there was a feeling I used to get.
Say that.
There's a feeling I used to get when I played games, it was like you just get lost in that world, you become immersed in this fantasy of the game. I mean, even if it has nothing to do with characters or plot or setting, it's just like the game mechanics somehow envelop you, and they just suck you in. The game mechanics, and you're just your brain is just completely obsessed with them, and being in the moment.
It's interesting you should
it's almost
say
like
that.
Meditation.
Because I actually had an opposite experience. I think that, there are certain games I loved as a child. I think every kid loves Monopoly and Stratego and checkers and those things. But I was terrible at puzzles. I hated puzzles. People would buy me puzzles, and I would hate them.
You talking about jigsaw puzzles?
Jigsaw puzzles. And now during the pandemic, my girlfriend and I have spent, I don't want to tell you how much money I've spent, but there's a place called Puzzle Zoo out in some of the better neighborhoods of LA, and they sell these gorgeous 1,000-piece puzzles made by I forgot the name of there's a Ravensburger is the best. They're from Germany. There's another one from Italy. We can put the link down when we do the show because they do make great puzzles. Ravensburger makes the best, and they're like $25 to $35 a pop. And we probably go through 2 to 4 puzzle boxes a month. So as an adult, puzzle is fucking crack cocaine. I get into flow states that last for 6 to 8 hours long. I'm getting so much dopamine in my brain. To me, puzzles are what gaming is for, like, the person who's buying all these expensive games today to play on their high-end consoles. That's what puzzles are for me today. We're talking about our youth, so I don't want to talk too much about today. But
no, that's great. I love it.
Monopoly is probably the only game from my youth that I'd be still willing to play today.
Monopoly, I know people look down on Monopoly, but a lot of people never played it right. And, Monopoly is a fascinating abstract strategy game. It's a strategy game that has nothing to do with geography, has nothing to do with a board, has nothing to do with tactics. Well, it has something to do with tactics, but it's completely abstract tactics. It's all about numbers and math and probabilities.
And also tactile. You have the beautiful hotels, you have the cars, you have the houses, you have the dice, you have the figurines. What was your favorite figurine when you played Monopoly? What was the thing that you always insisted in being?
Well, I think everybody wanted to be the car. I remember.
Yes, everybody wants to be the car, right? That's and nobody wants to be the iron.
But I remember, I kind of remember the first time I was one of the pieces nobody wanted to be, like the thimble or the iron something like that.
The iron, yeah.
But I remember the first time I was just like, the iron's the only one left, and so I became the iron, and I just remember thinking, wow, this is so great. I'm an iron. I just remember thinking it was so great to be such a weird thing,
You were a weird kid. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. What's the next category, my friend?
So the next category is dolls, and dolls is I take it to be anything that's like a model of the wider world. So anything that's a scale model. So toy cars would fit in there. Dolls would fit in there. Action figures are dolls, obviously.
They're dolls for boys.
Yes. And I just want to say, we haven't talked about gender at all, but maybe we should talk about it now.
Dolls is a great place to talk about gender because dolls are very gendered. Did you have any girl dolls that you played with? I
had a sister only 2 years younger than me, and we used to play. She used to have the girl dolls, and I had the boy dolls. And she had Strawberry Shortcake and Ken and Barbie.
Yeah.
And I used to play with her with the Ken and Barbie and Strawberry Shortcake. I loved them.
Yeah, really? Wow.
I almost wanted those too, I think. But I don't think my mom wanted to get me a Barbie doll. I don't think she would get me a Ken doll. But they were great. I mean,
did your sister have a dollhouse?
She never had a dollhouse, but
or a Barbie, whatever dollhouse. I don't remember what they called.
She never had a dollhouse, but it was
Malibu fun. Barbie house or whatever.
It was fun. The Strawberry Shortcake. We had a Strawberry Shortcake house, but the fun thing about these dolls was like dressing them and undressing them, and just having them socially interact and do adventures and things like that. I mean, that was the fun part. That was what you do. That's what boys do with their action figures, right? I mean,
it's interesting that you mentioned it because I also have a sister 2 years younger than me, and I did not play with my sister's dolls. No judgment, man. Or her dollhouse. No judgment, man. But I remember my mom bought my sister and I simultaneously these two dolls. One for my sister called Dressy Bessie and Dapper Dan. Dapper Dan was for me. And the whole point of Dressy Bessie and Dapper Dan was you were to put clothing on them. And I can't speak to my sister's experience with Dressy Bessie. I love the name Dapper Dan, by the way. I think that's probably when I become an MC, that will be my name, Dapper Dan. But I remembered that he had buttons, and all I ever remembered doing was being fascinated with the buttons. I didn't really think about how Dapper Dan looked. I was just more fascinated by the textile and the way that buttons work on clothes. But you were getting into my favorite part, which is action figures. And this is the difference between you and me. Using your two hands Describe to me the height of your GI Joe doll.
GI Joe, when I was a kid, was the same size as Star Wars, right? So
Okay,
like,
well, so how big?
so like about this big, like
How
about
many inches
three,
is
four
that?
inches, about 3-4 inches,
3, 4 inches. Okay.
maybe
For
5 inches.
okay, I'm gonna try very hard
Your
to.
GI Joe doll was the size of like a
Was
Ken
one
doll.
foot. It
Yeah.
was 1 foot long. It was literally, I could smack another kid in the head with a GI Joe doll. They were big. In fact, I looked it up in the '60s. They were a bit smaller, still bigger than your '80s one, but by the time the '70s hit, they were big. There was a whole series of dolls: GI Joe, Action Jackson with Kung Fu grip, and of course, the best of all dolls, which I never owned, which was a $6 million man doll because it had a little glass eye. You could look in the back for X-ray vision, and it had, you could pull a little part of its hand back and it would reveal its bionic stuff. And he had a tracksuit. But the GI Joe dolls of my era, they had different. GI Joe was a soldier. And what was neat about G.I. Joe dolls is he seemed to have served in every version of the United States military. So if you wanted to have him in like full Marine dress, great. Combat, great. Scuba, SEAL, Air Force, astronaut, you name it, whatever division of the military, whatever kind of gun or knife or scuba gear or any kind of attack equipment they made it. So you could constantly be putting G.I. Joe into different branches of the service and in different specializations of ops.
So
This was before they had the whole story of G.I. Joe from your era, which is completely different.
well, did you have a lot of these GI Joe dolls?
I did, and
Tell me how you
I
played.
dressed them.
Tell me how you played with them. Would you be dressing? So you dress them and undress them
G.I.
all the
Joe
time.
fall into the larger category of dolls called militaria. So I had, and you probably did too, the green toy soldiers, the tank. I had airplanes, model planes,
So
built planes.
would you have?
So I would just put armies together, and GI Joe was just part of my toy army.
So would you have battles with your toy soldiers? Okay.
Battles, and I positioned them, and I treated. I mean, I would even buy later on these beautiful figurines that they would sell at toy stores of like Napoleonic soldiers or swordsmen from the Roman and Greek era. I was just fascinated with all things. So for me, it was always and that's really where the aesthetics probably was the most. There was no real backstory. I didn't really think of them as actual people. I just loved, to this day, whenever I see military costumes on display or weapons on display, I know that comes from my childhood fascination with the aesthetics of it.
I remember with my Star Wars toys, I had a bunch of Star Wars toys, and I remember just setting them up into certain like dioramas almost, and
Yeah.
just staring at them, just putting them
Yeah.
into like situations and just trying to imagine what was happening, and then readjusting them. Maybe that looks better. What's going on in this scene? It was like, I don't know. It was a real stimulation for the imagination of a little kid.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm just, again, it's where I'm old man Corbell. For me, the movie, I had a couple Star Wars toys, but for me, the movie that really got it was Planet of the Apes, which came out before Star Wars. And I had the ape tree house, and I had all the ape dolls, and I had an ape mask, and I had an ape piggy bank. But I'd love, with this giant tree house, which is essentially a dollhouse, putting all of the ape figurines together. What's your next category?
Um. Well, let me just say one more thing about dolls. I remember.
Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
I remember there was this. One of my favorite doll like toys was just the this eraser spaceship from Diner Inc. It was like this. I had to look this up, but it was this little green spaceship, and it was it said Crygo 5 on it, and I just remember it was supposed to be an eraser, I think, but it was just so detailed, and I just remember. When an object is so detailed like that, it's like a model. It's like a tiny model of something that could exist in the larger world. It's like it makes a kid's imagination run wild, right? I mean, this is why.
Well, that's fascinating because you just brought it up and I haven't thought about it until then. And you mentioned cars, And I think for me, that was more the case. Like, uh, you told me you had Hot Wheels.
Hot Wheels, yes.
And Hot Wheels were souped up versions of cars that were real cars. And then there was Matchbox, which were more accurate depictions, but they were very small, of real cars. And then there was the one that I love, which came from England, called Corgi. And they made die-cast metal, much larger than Matchbox. I can't remember if they were the size of Hot Wheels. I don't think so. That were literally just exact reproductions of models of different kinds of cars, trucks, and vans. Uh, I have friends who still have their Corgis. I have the catalog from 1977 of Corgis. I would pay good money to this day to own those Corgis.
Well, there's something you tell me. There's something amazing about these little tiny objects that are so detailed, right? And it's like they transport you into a fantasy realm, right? That the object comes from. I mean,
Yeah.
do you think that's accurate way of putting it?
Yeah, and also you're not going to have even an adult will never have a full fleet of cars and trucks. So they're very empowering. And because they're based not in something imaginary like Star Wars or Planet of the Apes, but in what you're seeing in every day, I might not be able to afford a Corvette or a Rolls Royce or a beautiful station wagon VW, but I could get a die-cast metal remake or a model of it, and now I have almost as good as the real thing, as long as I'm not driving. And it's weird you should say this because there's a different school of thought. Rudolf Steiner and his school of teaching. They do not like to have exact details on their dolls. Because they feel that too much detail in the toy, a Waldorf school I'm talking about, they feel that too much detail limits the child's imagination. So their dolls and toys are deliberately unfinished so that the child can fill in the rest. And actually, you've stumbled into something that's really worth taking a minute or two to debate, which is, and it's something my mom often told me she would think about when giving me toys and my sister, which is, should there be so much detail in a toy that the child can see the similarity between their world and the world outside their own? Or should there be a degree of fantasy? You talked about this, I apologize, because it's almost not exactly what you're talking about, but give me the second. I had a space gun, and it was just literally silver metallic fabric full of some sort of filament. It was sold by a store called Children's Concepts, which was the hippie store down the street. And it looked nothing like a gun. It just looked like a pillow shaped like a cartoon of a gun in like David Bowie glitter silver. And I loved it. It had no realism. There was nothing about it that looked like a cartoon gun. There's nothing about it would ever even feel danger, that you could sleep on a pillow. But my ability to fill in the sci-fi elements into that gun was so much stronger than my ability to fill in the elements on a detailed gun. So I do feel like, in my opinion, children should have a mix of both. The toys that have exact detail and the toys that allow them to fill in the blanks.
Well, I remember loving toys with detail. Okay, I didn't have many G.I. Joe toys, but I remember G.I. Joe from my era. They were highly detailed. The figures, the vehicles, especially. I like my Star Wars toys too, and the Star Wars toys had a lot of detail. But I think the G.I. Joe even beat them on detail. And then I remember there were these things called muscle figures. They were like little pink characters about an inch tall. And, there was like 500 of them or something. They were like little wrestlers, and you could have like a ring. You could even buy the muscle wrestling ring, and it was terrible. But because the figures couldn't move, they were just they were kind of like eraser figures, but they were highly detailed. The muscle figures are highly detailed, so it was fun to just collect them, buy them. And then I remember another friend of mine, we both love muscle, and we would look at the muscle characters and we would both make up stories about the character and their abilities and tell each other about them. And I remember when we talked about them, we both believed what we were saying was the truth. I mean, we're both little Donald Trumps in that respect, but it was fun. It was fun. But yeah, I think the detail on some of these dolls, maybe I should say, is just it makes kids. It really forces kids to imagine things. I mean, it really sparks their It's like a writing prompt for a little kid, you know. I remember toy guns that were highly detailed, and I remember staring at a toy gun that was highly detailed, like a friend's toy gun or something, and just imagining what all the parts of the gun did, you know, and that was I could just sit there and stare at the gun for hours.
It's certainly interesting to think about the fact that you're looking at detail of things that are real, like a car that you could see down the street, or you look at things that are detailed that are not real, like a TIE fighter. And yet you'd have to look at both of them with the same understanding of physics and dynamics. And it does allow you to imagine that things that don't exist in your own world still follow certain rules of physics and theoretically might exist one day. You had another category.
So this final category, I'm just going to call costumes. And, you know, it's like when little girls play dress up, little boys too, everybody plays dress up, using makeup. Kids love playing with costumes. And I think this is a great way to end. This is our final category because, you know, adults love costumes too. You know, Halloween is the biggest money-making holiday of the year. Not anymore because of COVID, of course, but we'll see what happens this year. But adults love costumes.
Halloween's a little too real this year.
I know, but we'll see what happens. But
I'm going as a plague victim.
But adults love dressing up and being somebody else, and you know, kids love putting on costumes and pretending to be other people. You know, I don't know.
I'm sorry, I got to say this. How can you wear a mask when you're wearing a mask? I'm sorry, I had to say that. Terrible.
Exactly.
I apologize.
No, it's
you were
true.
saying.
Well, I mean, everybody, even little kids, everybody loves to dress up and pretend to be somebody else.
Yeah, that's a really big thing. I mean, I will say, I remember having a pith helmet, which is, if you've ever watched an old 1940s Tarzan movie, is this white helmet with a wide brim that you would wear, that safari hunters will wear. And I would remember watching Tarzan movies or anything with my pith helmet on as if I was on safari. And then I remember I had a wing commander helmet with a visor that I could put under. I had a spacesuit. I literally had a Children's Concepts again, I think. I can't remember where my mom bought it, but it was a United States NASA seal. And I remember watching maybe one of the last of the spacewalks with my Snoopy doll, who had an astronaut suit on and a helmet, and me in my astronaut suit watching the astronauts.
How old were you?
Somehow, I must have been 6 or 7. You know, this would have been 1974. You know, it was probably 8. But it was the end of but yeah, that somehow even at home, I could just walk around. Most all people at some point in their life before Halloween had hats and suits. And when Planet of the Apes came out, one of the toys I got was a gorilla mask, so I could just wear that. You know, and I think for a child, or just speaking of my own experience, if you donned on a uniform of an adult, and I remember, again, I had a military jumpsuit, you know, it would make you feel momentarily like adult. And when you put on an ape mask or a monster mask, it would give you all the power that comes with being a monster. And I think children actually like monster masks because because they think of themselves as monsters, awkward, scary creatures, and they feel stronger if they can transform their identity. That's just my old man theory.
Do you remember how you used to play when you put on the space suit? Do you remember?
Yeah, I would just there was a cabinet in my house, and I would take a yodel, which was wrapped in silver, and I'd put on my silver suit, and I would get in the cabinet and pretend it was just a capsule, and that I was in space. I had a lot of stuff about. Look, 70 to 75, everything was about space. I lived near the Hayden Planetarium. I'd go there. I'd get toys from the Hayden Planetarium. I was just a space geek. And outside of the Halloweens, I think that was really what I think of when I think of costumes. How about you?
I remember wanting to be a cowboy all the time. And I don't remember why, because I don't think I watched a lot of Westerns, but I liked everything about the
Did you have the
costume.
chaps and the six gun and
I think all
the
I had
hat?
was, I think I had a hat and maybe some guns and a vest. And I mean, I think I
Oh,
saw,
you're full on cowboy.
yeah, I think I saw pictures. It didn't look that great, though. I think I saw pictures of what I looked like back then. It wasn't that great looking, but because I think my mother might have made a lot of, back in those days, we were really poor, and my mother tried to make all our costumes, and she wasn't actually very good at it. But I loved it. I remember loving dressing up as a cowboy. Um, I don't know why I liked it so much.
It's a classic. There's a photo of my father. He's 8 years old. It's 1940. He's Czech refugees living in London. And my grandparents bought him the best cowboy uniform I've ever seen. He had the hat, he had the vest, he had the chaps, he had the six shooters. I'm pretty sure I had some very weak cowboy stuff, like a cheap hat and a cap gun six shooter, no vest, no boots, nothing. But I'm pretty sure if my dad had lived, I would have had better cowboy regalia. I do really feel like the cowboy is a rite of passage that all young boys and maybe even young girls go through in this country or in other countries, because the cowboy is like a knight, just a mythical beast, a mythical. Yeah, cowboys are, and it's weird because they're a real thing. I'm sorry, I'm from New York City. I often forget, even here in California, where I see real cowboys, that they're not wearing a costume.
Maybe the cowboy appealed to me because it was the idea. Yeah, like you're saying, a knight. It's the idea of being good, right? You're a
Yeah.
paragon of good and morality and virtue. I think that appealed to me as a kid. I mean, I think I was one of those, not a goody two shoes, but I liked the idea of doing
Really?
the
I
right
like,
thing as a
because
kid.
Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid were popular when I was a kid. So I enjoyed being the robber, the stagecoach, the man in black, the bad guy. Stick 'em up, stick 'em up.
I
You
never
know,
wanted to be the bad guy as a kid.
I
I wanted to
wanted
be
to
the
be
good
the
guy.
outlaw, the
No, I
bank
never.
robber, the bandito, the
No.
badass guy. I guess that's great about and of course, whether you're the good cowboy or the bad cowboy, you belong to no one. You just roam the range with your horse. And again, horses are great because you're a kid, so you love pets.
Oh, you know what? You know where I saw cowboys? It was
Where?
probably at Knott's Berry Farm and other amusement parks like that. But Knott's Berry Farm used to have a ride, right, where you get on a stagecoach and you go from one end of the park to the other, and in the middle you get held up by outlaws,
Oh, wow.
and then somebody comes and saves you. So I think I saw like actors pretend to be cowboys
Wow.
firsthand. So that's why I think I was into it.
I did have an Indian one where I had a headdress and I had the arrows and the knives and the things that you cut with. I actually kind of enjoyed Indians too. I thought they were pretty cool to play.
Chris, that's insensitive.
I'm
It's
totally
culturally
insensitive.
insensitive, Chris.
Well, all of this is terrible because, I mean, if you really think about it, most boy costumes were just, training either for jobs or for killing people. And I remember, like, maybe 20 years ago, it was a Halloween morning, afternoon. I saw a mother with her son and daughter, and the daughter was dressed as a pretty princess, and the son was dressed as a ninja. And I thought, yeah, that sums it right up.
It is interesting to
And I
me.
wanted to say this real quick. Women who are watching, absolutely. I'm glad you can play soldier, and I'm glad that you'll be a ninja. And certainly, if you are boys who want to dress as a pretty princess, totally cool too. I'm not saying that this has to be this way. I'm just saying that for a vast majority of men and women, or males and females, there just seems to be a difference in, like, I want to be beautiful and loved by all, and I want to secretly kill people with my bare hands. And actually, I think it's better to really want to be the princess. I think that's the winning choice. I don't know really if wanting to be a killer, a silent killer with your hands, is a good sign.
Well, they're both like uh, they're both aspirational archetypes, right? The
Right,
soldier
but
and the
I would honestly
princess.
say that we should all be aspiring to be a princess over being a soldier. There's no happy ending in this desire to grow up to kill people.
Well, I don't know. There's some degree.
We should all have
Well,
tiaras.
well, the princess is an interesting. I have noticed there's a large number of girls that are interested in being a princess, dressing like princesses. They're obsessed with princesses. The Disney princess thing is very popular. But what does a princess do? I mean, the princess is a role where you're not really doing much. I mean, for the most part, right? I mean, most princesses. I mean, I could be wrong about this, but most princesses don't really do much, right? I mean, they
Oh, I
just.
don't know. I mean, I think they have powers. They have a following. They can edict rules. No, they're
I guess
powerful
in Frozen,
people.
I guess Frozen was a turning point in
Yeah, they
Disney
have ice
princesses. The
powers. Yeah,
Frozen, the Frozen princesses were very powerful, and they drove the plot.
and Disney princesses in general are very powerful, not very proactive players. They're really good heroes and models. But uh, I really don't want to talk about things that aren't really keen to my own experience. So, but yeah, with costumes, what was your favorite costume?
Well, like I said, I like being the cowboy. What else did I like? I liked pirates. I mean, okay, part of the outlaw thing. I think pirates was was the only outlaw thing I allowed myself. What else did I like as a kid? I'm trying to think now. I tried different. I remember as a kid, I tried to make costumes myself. I was obsessed with. It was like costumes were part of arts and crafts to me. I wanted to make awesome costumes, and I think I failed over and over. Every single one of my costumes was horrible. I think I tried to be the headless horseman one year,
Oh wow!
and I don't think I did a very good job on the costume. I think it was pretty horrible. I mean, you could see the top of my head peeking out of the neck part of the cape, and it wasn't working. Um, but uh, but that was for me. I think costumes were an art project that I really enjoyed. And I remember now. I guess I haven't thought about this for years. I still do it. Before Halloween's coming, months before Halloween, I'm imagining what I'm gonna make.
Well, you make great
Okay.
costumes. I mean, I've celebrated Halloween with you, Randall, and you always have some great stuff.
Oh, well,
Or you
thank
helped.
you.
I think did you work with Annette on her that witch from Disney with the big horns? You worked on her
Oh yeah,
headpiece.
Maleficent. I helped her do Maleficent one year. It was great. Yeah, I really worked hard on that costume.
It was gorgeous. I remember that.
Yeah, she was the
Yeah.
best. She was the best Maleficent around. I think. Yeah.
So I guess just to wrap things up a bit, what do you think is the overall role of toys? I mean, yes, obviously they're
I
entertaining, but do you think?
well, we've already talked about this a little bit, but I think they're toys are really able to engage the childhood brain in a way uh, that we lose, don't we? I mean,
Hmm.
kids have kids have a little bit harder time understanding what's real and what's fake, and toys kind of exploit that, right, in a way, because it's almost like a hack. There's a kids' brains just they can't figure out what reality is. So toys come in and they exploit that fact, and they're fun. so
And
so
they're fun. And I think that says it better than anything else. And while we pretend that we're outgrowing toys, let me tell you, I cannot wait to see the latest releases from Apple because they're my favorite toy maker.
yeah,
Uh,
our smartphones the new toy, a toy for everyone, kids
uh,
and adults alike.
Watches, VR equipment, you name it. You want a toy, go to Apple. Randall, I got to thank you again for picking such an awesome topic.
All right, you're welcome, Chris. thanks for
And I
thanks for doing
really,
it.
oh, my pleasure. And I want to hear what you guys think. What were your favorite toys? What are your kids' favorite toys? Do you think that we're kind of right about toys? And would you like to hear us talk about this kind of stuff more? We normally talk a lot about arts. We don't really talk that much about entertainment. Really want to know that. Until then, thank you for listening or watching. I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Have a great day.